Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast. I'm Billy Embody. We'll have Shea Dixon and On3 National Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power, along with us very shortly. But before we get into that, do want to remind you guys, we are presented by StatusJet, statusjet.com. Fly in style on game day to see your Tigers. Go to their website. You know already that they're going to give you a discount on a round trip flight with the Bengal Tiger. So mention that when you're booking, but talk about it with your friends, your family. Maybe even you want to bring clients to see the Tigers play. This is the way to go on game day. You can go in and out on the same day, be back in your bed at a reasonable time. And that's the perk of flying private. They could also arrange for you transfers, catering, special experiences wherever you want to go. And plus, it's the perfect time to start planning as well for the holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Start planning those trips where StatusJet can take you today and use code Bengal Tiger for a discount. Before we jump into our chat with Charles Power and Shea Dixon, I also want to remind you guys, we are presented by Rhoback, Rhoback.com. I've got the Sailor Mike hoodie on right now. It's got that stretchy but nice fabric. Just makes you feel cozy without making you feel hot. It's really nice because I like to wear the hoodies around a lot, but sometimes it's hot wherever you are in the South, and you've got to be able to manage the heat a little bit. And that's the great thing about Rhoback is they really have a collection that really can manage that heat for you, whether you're wearing a pullover, whether you're wearing a polo, whether you're wearing a hoodie. And when you look at the collection that they've rolled out for LSU, it's incredible. You got promo code Bengal Tiger 20 for 20% off your order. Take a look at all the attention to detail that they've got on some of these. You look at the Tiger Stadium, the Death Valley polo really stands out. There's a Sailor Mike one if you're watching on YouTube. This Bayou Bengal edition polo is spectacular as well. So check them out. Code Bengal Tiger 20 for first-time customers only gets you a 20% off discount. So it's worth it with this type of stuff. So we love Rhoback here at the Bengal Tiger, and we appreciate them supporting the Bengal Tiger Podcast. Happy to be joined now by On3 National Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power, as well as our own Shea Dixon. Fellas, it was fun the last time we did this. It's long overdue that we get together. We talk a lot about some of the best prospects in the country, as well as the latest rankings update. So, Charles, thanks for joining us. And you had a busy last week or so with everything going on. But one of the things that you did get out and see is the #1 overall prospect in the country. That's Bryce Underwood. So if we want to jump right in there, what are you seeing now that you've or what are you feeling now that you've seen him in person live?
Yeah, so this is my first time seeing Bryce Underwood in person actually throw a football probably since his sophomore year. So it was really a priority for us to just get out and see him because we didn't get to see him on the camp circuit or at the events that we went to in person this summer. So flew out to Detroit last week, got to see him play a game, which really was pretty uneventful in terms of just the actual game. Like they won very easily. I think he only threw like 11 passes, but I think just seeing Bryce, just like he's the complete physical package. He's 6'4", 215, has continued to get bigger. And I think just has, kind of elite physical traits. The ball jumps out of his hand. You can see that in warmups. I mean, he has a probably top, I guess, maybe 3 arm in all of high school football, just off of guys that I've seen in person. And so he's, huge arm, extremely mobile. I think that's something we've seen from his senior year is he is a real threat in the run game on design runs. And I saw that's probably one of my biggest takeaways from seeing him in person on Friday is he is just a weapon in the run game when you're running like design runs like QB powers and things of that nature. I think he's averaging 17 yards a carry this season. So he really kind of does what he wants to when they call his number. And I'm excited to see what he does in the playoffs. So they have a big game this weekend. I think this is kind of like a league championship type of game. I think the team they're playing maybe is undefeated or has 1 loss, I want to say. So he's going to have a tough some tougher games. Probably the toughest games of the season have yet to come, and that's one thing I think that I'm eager to see. But I think when you go back and look at the big picture of the Bryce Underwood, he's been a #1 player, like wire to wire in this cycle. That is uncommon. I think the last time that happened, at least in companies I've been involved with is maybe Robert Kimdichie. Like I think it's been a while since that's occurred. And he, on our last rankings update, we bumped him to a rating of 99. So I think when you look at, what he's done, just the improvements he's made with his accuracy, he's kind of dialed in mechanically, just the body of work in high school football, the physical traits. I think he's got a case as one of the, better quarterback prospects, in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years. So eager to see how his senior season finishes out, but he's a guy who I think just looks like a franchise type of quarterback, and one that LSU fans should be thrilled about.
He's got a 99.36 rating. Leonard Fournette had a 99.63. So we'll see down the stretch here, Charles. Obviously, the industry rankings play into this. What rivals ESPN, I was going to say Scout there for a second, and 24/7 do, but could go down as the highest rated signee for LSU in the modern era. We were saying right before the pod that one of our most listened to episodes last year, in the past 2 years, outside of beating Bama in overtime, was when we had you on and you just talked for an hour about how y'all do rankings. Before, so that folks can know, as we dive into these other guys, and you just talked about Bryce. Full disclosure here, I'm on now with two of my closest friends at the company. I talk to both y'all every day. Charles watches so much. Like when you say you've seen Underwood in person and hadn't seen him in person since sophomore year, you've watched every single snap Bryce Underwood has played, and you watch it the day after he plays. So kind of your brief synopsis of just as you put together a top 300, letting people know, pulling back the curtain, that you and Cody are watching every snap of every kid out there.
Yeah, every step of every kid out there might be a little, generous, but
well, that's how you sound sometimes when it's 2 a.m. and you're tired and you're like, I'm on watch number 150 right now.
Yeah, but we try to get as much exposure to these guys, and I think watching games, we obviously watch highlights, and that's kind of like your elevator pitch, what you can do, the strengths as the player. But as these guys get into their senior year, especially like quarterbacks, I think having the context of the game is really important. I love watching game film on corners. Like corners are positions that's difficult to really gauge. Like if you're watching highlights of a corner, you can kind of see the things they can do, but you don't know if he's getting beat in the game. So there's a lot of context that can be helped by watching full games. I think that's kind of a little bit of a misnomer. Something that's, I guess, has evolved kind of in our business, our field, is we've had the ability to watch all of these games. Like we have access to basically every high school game in the country virtually. So it's kind of at your fingertips, and it makes it way easier in terms of just getting a better picture of these players. So kind of what I'll do, like on, Friday nights, I try to watch as many games live as possible. And then, once we're able to kind of go back and get film, like I will watch games that are completed Friday night, up until Friday night. And then I think before college games are on Saturday, I'll try to watch as many as possible and kind of see like, who had a big game. Is there something I need to watch now? And then we're just kind of always catching up on it. But especially with the quarterbacks, like I try to, catch up on the national quarterbacks every week, just to kind of keep a running log, at least mentally, or kind of in our spreadsheets we work off of, just kind of how these guys are playing. So it's fun. And I think now is the funnest time of the year for me, when we really we've kind of put the 2026 ranking, have that situated. And now we can really focus and dig in on these seniors for the kind of the home stretch of the senior season, go and see them in person at these all-star events, and really kind of dig in and work on our kind of the final iteration of our 2025 rankings. So that's the best part to me, is to have actual film and in-person evaluations to go off of.
Iteration. Charles is out here trying to drop the sanguine commitment from Kamorian Pimpton, who is being outdone by CJ Jim Coyley this class, who gives some of the most unbelievable quotes you'll ever see. He's right down the road from you in Nashville. I'm stealing Billy's job here as host and say, we'll do a segue. You said you love corners. I remember talking to you early on in the process, and DJ Pickett and Cade Phillips were two guys you mentioned, and they were both ranked as safeties. And you said, I think these guys are corners, and you moved them. Somebody out there is pretty good at evaluating corners. Corey Raymond agrees with you. put him up top of his list right there. Naeem Offord and some others as guys he wanted most from out of state, went and got him. Let's take it one step at a time here. But again, kudos to you and Cody for seeing that early, moving it. The rest of the industry's followed. What do you see in DJ Pickett, who I promise you guys, when you see this kid in person, if you haven't, he'll be at the Bama and OU games. Go look down on the sidelines. We are talking a legit Charles, 6'4"?
Yeah, he's 6'4". Yeah, 6'4", 180. I think his arms, we measured him at the On3 Elite Series. I think his arms are 33 and 5/8, so elite length. And I think what really separates DJ Pickett, in addition to the size, is he has the fluidity of a much smaller player. Like when you watch him just backpedal, it is effortless. And I saw some workout stuff of him in the spring, maybe even like a year ago, that like whenever you see a big DB move like that, it's like, okay, like he could definitely play corner just from the feet, change of direction, movement skills. And then you look at like his two-way experience playing receiver. So he's got the ball skills. I think he, in terms of those top corners, especially as a junior, I really liked his physicality. I think his experience playing safety has helped him just, as a tackler. It's like, I think we tend to underestimate physicality at corner. Like sometimes we get caught up just in like height, weight, speed, track speed, which is all really important, but you definitely don't want guys who are shy, in terms of contact, and DJ Pickett is not that. And I think too, Shea, like, we've talked about it. His team is not great this year, but you're seeing a guy who's competing. He plays with effort, and he's playing a lot more corner this year. Like, he had primarily played safety. So I think when he was ranked as a safety, it's like, okay, this is a big DB. He's playing safety. Let's project him at safety, where like now he's playing corner a little bit more. He's got, I think, 4 picks in the season. And they've probably, I don't think they've played a full season because of the hurricanes in the Tampa area. So, I think he has like 4 picks in 6 games. So he's playing great. Has the track speed, and kind of all of the measurables you look for at corner. So, and I think when you look at him and Cade Phillips, those are two who really fit what Corey Raymond likes at corner. Like, I think if you look at all the top corners nationally, we have, dimension measurements on all these guys. I think they're the longest, kind of biggest framed corners among ones who are kind of in that top 100, top 150 range, and they're both committed to LSU. So I don't think that's a coincidence, given what Corey Raymond values at the position. And I think DJ Pickett certainly, hits that to a T, and I think it's a really strong corner year nationally. So I think having him number 1, at this point in the process says a lot.
I don't try to speak under your rankings, Charles, but I've told my board many times that I predict he'll be top 5 by the end, Cade Phillips, in the rankings. And you're only one part of it. There's 3 other sites out there. So I'm not speaking for this is me just in general. But yeah, as you said, without rattling off measurements, you would put him out. There's some of the best out there. So I'm with you on those two.
When you look at these corners, DJ Pickett is going to widely be assumed to just step right in, start right away. What is Cade Phillips, looking like so far that, LSU needs corners? They need to continue to get guys in there that can play farther away from the ball that you are. I mean, usually you can adjust a little bit better, but do you see guys running around on film right now between DJ and Cade that are that type of impact for LSU early?
I think so. And I would, if I was an LSU fan, I would not sleep on Cade Phillips. Like, Cade Phillips is a guy who, like I mentioned, has elite measurables. He, I think, has 33.5-inch arms, 10.5-inch hands. He's like 6'1.5", I think 185 plus athlete. He was a state medalist in the long jump. So just in terms of the physical traits, probably as good as anybody in this corner group nationally. And I think he has great ball skills, really strong hands. We've seen him make a ton of plays on offense this year. He's like jumping up, mossing DBs, making acrobatic catches, and has multiple interceptions as well. Has experience playing safety like DJ Pickett, so he's physical. So I think Cade Phillips brings a lot to the table. I would not sleep on him if I'm an LSU fan. I think he's a guy who, as we continue to go through the process, like it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could like be in the 5-star conversation if he continues to play like he has, and moves up kind of the corner position pecking order. And I think he's supposed to play in the All-American Bowl in San Antonio in January. So hopefully that would be a great opportunity for him as well if we're able to see him there. But I mean, he has like a lot of the traits and skills you look for at corner. So I think almost any other class in the country, you're looking at him as like, this is the crown jewel corner. But I think pairing him with DJ Pickett and Aiden Anding gives LSU a truly, I think, elite corner class. And I think Aiden Anding is just an exceptional complement to those two guys in terms of, you look at the skill sets and how they fit. When you look at DJ Pickett and Cade Phillips, these are two outside corners, and Aiden Anding has just, I think, a really good skill set to play like in the nickel, kind of in the slot. And he's super competitive, athletic. I loved watching him play against Trey Green in the state championship last year. He did not back down from like guarding a 6'7" kind of monster pass catcher. And he's having a really good year. So I think Aiden Anding is a guy who could certainly push for a 4th star. And I think if you're looking at it from like a team building perspective and bringing in guys who complement each other well and can play different roles in LSU's defense, I think, Corey Raymond and the staff have hit this corner group out of the park. And I know that was a huge position of priority in this cycle for LSU. So I think if you're an LSU fan, you have to be really kind of ecstatic with this group that they're bringing in.
I will say, for clarity, I meant top 5 corners, not 5-star, but we'll see what happens. That's my guess.
I gotcha.
But yeah, and Aiden Anding too, Charles. And for people who don't know, we article this week Tyler Harden did with the Bengal Tiger, where he talked about, I was playing 4 sports. I was playing basketball, baseball, all this, running track. And look, this guy is also very successful in the track, that he didn't get back to playing football until just 2 years ago. So still some development to go with Aiden Anding that could push his upside even further.
And he's much younger too. I think he'll turn 18 in July. So he's a guy who he's probably not done growing.
Underwood turns 18 a month after that.
Right. So these are guys who I think are, just have continued room for development physically. And so, yeah.
Speaking of a guy that I think you could make the case that might have as much room for development as anyone in the class, just because of how big of a freak he is for LSU, it's Carius Kern. He's on your big freaks list. When you look at how highly rated we obviously have him already, coupled with kind of, I think, still some of the newness of football for him. Speak to kind of that trajectory for Carius and what he can do protecting Underwood and then blocking for Harlan Berry and JT Lindsay, guys like that.
Yeah, Carius Kern, I think when you look at the offensive linemen in this cycle nationally, and it's probably the best offensive, not probably, it is the best offensive line cycle that I think I've ever evaluated in this role. He might be the best athlete of all of them. This is a guy who has been clocked in like the 4.8, 4.9 range in the 40, and he's well over 300 pounds. He really kind of brings, D-line athleticism to offensive line. It really, up until this year, was kind of a two-way player in high school. And I think he's primarily focusing on playing offensive line this year. And I think we've definitely seen some strides. He's an awesome run blocker, great mover to the second level. I think he could be great, like working as a puller or as a zone blocker, depending on what kind of scheme you want to run. Just great getting to the second level. When you get him on a linebacker, it's basically over. Like, I've seen plays where he drives the guy onto the bench, so like he's put together some strong senior film. I think, has room to continue improving. I think once he gets to LSU, working in like pass pro and pass blocking. But I think he has the athleticism and movement skills to really play anywhere on the O-line. Like, if he continues to develop with his pass set, it's not out of the realm of possibility he can maybe play tackle. Like, I think he'll probably be a guard at LSU, but just given the athleticism, there's a lot of paths to success there, and I think he's really kind of an exciting interior offensive lineman. And kind of in that, like, if we were to expand our 5 stars now, he would be in the 5-star range. So I think there's a lot to be excited about there. And when you look at what LSU's done on the offensive line, recruiting under Brad Davis, I think they brought in a lot of guys with traits. LSU is going to have 2 high draft picks along the offensive line this year. And I think when you look at guys they brought in, Weston Davis was a guy that we had as a 5-star last year, really a complete freak. And I think, having a guy like Weston Davis as an offensive tackle in the future, Carius Kern, I mean, these are players with just high-end athleticism, physical talent, dimensions. So I think Brad Davis is doing a great job with the O-line, and Carius Kern is certainly one that you would be excited about. Yeah, there he is doing I think a handspring.
Billy's so good at this. I was waiting for you to talk about the flips. Charles actually put me on this video, and at the time it had like 2 views. I think it was me and Charles. And I just texted it to Billy. He's already got it on YouTube on the screen. So there he is, Charles, your boy doing flips. Yeah,
which, I mean, that's great to see. Obviously we like that it translates to football, probably most importantly. But yeah, he's super athletic, and I think some of the camp numbers that we were able to track down from when he did go to college camps last summer were extremely impressive. So, and he's a guy who I think once he gets in LSU's strength program is going to only continue to improve. So he's definitely a guy that is worth being excited about. I think one of the headliners of LSU's class.
And you were highest on Weston Davis too, among everyone else last year, Charles. And he's the guy that's getting all the buzz right now outside of Tyree Adams, who you had top 100. He just had surgery, so he'll be out for the remainder of the year. But if they need a backup at some point this year, it looks like it will be the guy that you put as a 5-star and is making quick work under Brad Davis. So a nice run for Brad Davis here, Charles. About 2 or 3 years of really good recruiting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to give one of the guys in LSU's personnel department, I think Carl St. Cyr has a great eye for offensive linemen. Assistant director of player personnel. I think he does a great job, working with Brad Davis on these O-line evals.
100%. Billy, what thoughts on next? I could sit here and brag on Charles's rankings all day, but go on.
Oh, I think we've got to go to another 5-star, and then we'll look ahead to the class of 2026. Harlem Berry and what he and JT Lindsay mean to LSU's long-term future at running back. Is Harlem Berry that kind of quintessential new era running back that you kind of see with like an Isaiah Pacheco type of guy?
Yeah, I mean, Harlem Berry, I think so. I think for starters, Harlem Berry added a 5th star our last update, which we do not finish with a lot of 5-star running backs. It's just kind of the climate that we're in now. We kind of are projecting towards the NFL draft, and you probably see on average maybe 1 to 2 running backs, I guess, go in the first round every year. Maybe it's probably more like 1 at this point. But Harlem Berry, I think, has separated himself to this point as the #1 running back in the cycle. And honestly, we didn't really see a viable challenger when we were going back and looking at the first month or so of the senior season. I think he's completely electric. He has obviously has the straight line speed. This is a guy who won the state championship in the 100 and 200 meters, I think, as a sophomore. But I think most importantly, that speed translates over to the field. He can really harness that speed. I think he has really kind of special lateral agility. The kind of cuts he's able to make while not slowing down really stands out. Cody Belair, our national scout who works with me on rankings, has compared him to Reggie Bush. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. When you watch this, I mean, Harlem Berry's last month or so, like the film, I was just going through it this morning, is awesome. Like he is making just like if Harlem Berry was to put together a highlight so far of his senior year, it would probably blow you away with some of the runs he's been able to make. Because he maximizes yardage. He can be hemmed in on the sideline, and he'll find a way. Find a way out, weave all the way across the field. He's kind of a problem solver as a running back. So I think that's one thing that I liked about him when we, ranked him as the #1 running back in the cycle. I loved his instincts and his vision He's obviously not the biggest guy, and I think he's going to probably need to gain probably 15 pounds to kind of hit on that first round projection. He probably is going to end up need to like be around 195 to 205. But I think when you look at just the overall skill set, he's just an extreme weapon in the pass game. I think it kind of does have the makings of a modern running back, Billy, like you said. I think if you're going to look at like a recent running back draft pick, like a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, I think would be a comparison as well. I've compared him to Jamal Charles. So
yeah, that was your OG comparison.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, on that spectrum, Jamal Charles, Reggie Bush, Jahmyr Gibbs, like that skill set, I think is what he brings to the table. And then I think when you look, what you said?
We've heard the late Joe McKnight as well. You'll take any of those guys if that's the kind of talent you're getting.
For sure. So, and I think the pass catching is something that we don't always see on Friday nights, just because he's the primary ball carrier. Just at his high school, they aren't going to throw him the ball a ton. Why would you throw it to him when you can hand it off to him? But I think when you're projecting him to college and really the NFL, that's going to be, I think, a lot of the impact he provides. So, and we saw that, in the 7-on-7 circuit when he played with Bryce Underwood at the OT7 regional. I mean, he was like, Harlem Berry has a receiver skill set at running back. So I think he is going to be a complete weapon in the backfield, and a guy who is really dangerous on passing downs as well. So, and I think pairing him with JT Lindsey has impressed me this year, running super hard. He is kind of a violent runner. I think he's improved just the power he's running with. Combining those guys with Caden Durham, who has been kind of we knew Caden Durham was really good when he got to LSU, but I think some of the things he's shown, early on in his freshman season, we necessarily didn't see at Duncanville. And I think just the contact balance, the vision between the tackles has really been a very pleasant surprise. So I think, Caden Durham looks like a viable RB1 in the SEC. And, I think he's a potential like future star for LSU. Really, I think when you might have to go back a ways to find a guy who had like a better kind of skill set at running back for LSU. So just as a complete back. So I think when you look at Caden Durham, Harlem Berry, JT Lindsey, that is a really exciting nucleus of running back talent. I mean, Frank Wilson has kind of flipped that running back room here in the last couple of years. And I think like they're recruiting that position as good as anybody nationally. And, Caden Durham looks like a huge hit so far. Yeah. So
you ranked Caden Durham as a top 5 back, and that was before he then went out and was running like 10-2s all spring. And
yeah, that would have been great to see his track time.
East Texas just went wild on the track circuit in this past spring. Yeah. It was insane.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, Caden Durham. I've been so impressed with his contact balance. Like, I mean, that South Carolina game, I think he broke like 10 tackles or something like that. It was an absurd number. So that's a skill set that really projects, and I think all these backs complement each other really well. So I think if you're an LSU fan, you have to be pretty stoked about what Frank Wilson's doing at running back.
No question. Speaking of Frank, Shea, do we go down to New Orleans for a little update on?
You said you were jumping to 26, but really this is 25, and we won't keep Charles forever. We got about 15 minutes left, so we'll keep this short. You're not Wilt Fong, you're not Chad, you're not anyone who has to predict where a kid's going to go. But Jakeem Stewart reclassified from 2026 into 2025. That's the current class. He's having to sit out at Edna Carr because of transfer rules. He sat out his freshman year at St. Aug because of transfer rules. He played a year ago at St. Aug. Film's out there. You got to watch it all. We thought we'd get at least one more season to watch him, maybe 2 if he didn't reclassify. He reclassifies, but gets put in a spot where now he's only got 1 season of football, Charles. And you and I have talked about this a lot. I've talked about this with a lot of coaches out there, college coaches, and there's just a lot of curiosity from fans and even coaches as to how this plays out, because needless to say, it is very rare that someone that's that highly projected, ranked, and is talented, when injury's not involved, or he only started playing football as a senior, only played 1 year of high school football, and that was his sophomore year, meaning that he didn't even play the year prior to enrolling in a college. Like I know rankings is what you have to do, but just projection wise, whether he goes to LSU, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, like what is an expectation on a kid like this?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think this is one of the most unique projections, evaluations that I've had to deal with, because when I say unique, I mean, it is utterly unique. I don't think there's never, we deal with maybe double-digit reclassifications every year, and that's difficult on its own. But when you talk about a reclassification where they also don't play the year that they're reclassifying, or the season that they're reclassifying, the most recent season, I don't think that's ever happened just off the top of my head. So yeah, man, it's extremely unique. I think, like you said, Shea, Jakeem Stewart's really talented. His one season at St. Aug, I think he had 33 tackles for loss and 20 sacks. I mean, he was a dominant player. He's been great on the camp circuit. I think, but this projection, there is a degree of unknown, which I guess you could kind of say, is it a necessary unknown? But he's entering college. He's going to be entering college with a degree of unknown, where the last time we saw him play football was 12 plus months ago, and that was the only time we saw him in his high school career. So it's interesting. I mean, I think defensive line too is a position where we don't see a ton of true freshmen make impacts already. I think I put together our true freshman top performers, All-American teams every week, and monitor that group every week. And it's a position that's tough. Like, I think you see guys make more plays kind of as pass rushers than you do as true defensive linemen, because it's just, I mean, you're playing in a phone booth against grown men. Some of these guys that you're going up against, these offensive linemen, might be 24 years old at this point in college football. So it's a tough road to hoe as a defensive lineman early on anyway. So I think there's a degree of unknown. I think anytime you look at prospects and there's that much volatility in their high school career, it's tough to project, especially nowadays, in just the modern college football climate. But Jakeem is super talented. I think, whenever we've seen him, like, he's competitive. Like, I think he has the mindset, and he's, everything we've heard from colleges and people who know him, like, he's wired the right way as a competitor. And I think he's very polished with his, just his hands, his pass rush move. But there's certainly going to be things that he needs to improve upon. Like, he's a straight line athlete. Like, he's going to have to improve his flexibility, his lateral agility. But it's anybody's best guess. If anybody said that they knew with certainty how this is going to shake out, I mean, I think they'd be guessing. It's a difficult one. I think it's one that we're going to have a lot of conversations about, kind of where we slot him in, because it's, the sample size and what we are going to have to, like, the material that we're going to have to go through to evaluate Jakeem Stewart, to slot him in the 2025 rankings, is going to be completely different than what we have for everybody else. So hopefully we get to see him. I think maybe he's going to be at the Under Armour All-American game. So that would be huge, but it is very difficult. And I think it's something where, there's just a lot of unknown there. And, I'm not the biggest fan, just because in terms of just what I look at from a developmental standpoint with reclassifications, because I think when we take the full scope and full accounting of modern players in college football who have reclassified, I think it can be detrimental at quarterback. I think that's kind of proven at this point. But just in general, a guy like Ryan Williams, I think, is going to be, when we have enough of a sample to step back, a guy like Ryan Williams is going to be considered a huge exception. And Ryan Williams was, I think, probably the most productive receiver in the nation, or at least that was a recruit in that 2-year span of his last 2 years of high school football. I mean, he had maybe 4,000 plus total yards, his last 2 years in high school football. So extremely extremely productive and as ready to go probably as a junior could be just from an experience standpoint. But I think we're going to look back on that and he's going to be the exception and very far from the rule with that. So it's interesting. And it's something that, is certainly more common nowadays that we see. And we have to kind of, like college coaches have to deal with it. We have to deal with it and try to figure out, kind of how to navigate that in terms of rankings and what we're doing. But man, it's extremely unique, and it's something like hopefully we get to see him in person is kind of how I would leave it right now. But it's going to be something that we're going to talk a lot about, as a group to try to figure out how to compare him with these 2025 prospects.
Yeah, you talk about seeing him in person, Under Armour, and then he plans to enroll in a college right afterwards. So the good news is he'll be on a college campus. He'll be practicing. Billy, I'll let you take it, but quickly to add some perspective here, Charles, you had Don McKinley as a 5-star last year. Don McKinley did play throughout his high school career at Acadiana at a high level at 5A. LSU has needed interior D-line help this year. They brought in one of the best to do it in Bo Davis in terms of what he can develop, and they lose Jacobian Guillory, their best DT, 2 games into the season. Don McKinley has played in 4 games, 64 snaps. That's 64 for 16 snaps a game. So maybe I would tell LSU fans or any fans, Oregon, Ohio State, USC, the expectation for Jakeem Stewart might be 10 to 15 to 20 snaps a game, when I think a lot of people just think, oh, he's a just plug and play starter.
Yeah. In defensive line's a position that rotates so much anyway. So like you have to get depth. And I think if he could see the field and see meaningful snaps, I think that would be, a realistic positive, I think, as a true freshman. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch Jakeem Stewart and his development and just kind of how he's able to impact LSU either early, or he's going to take a little time to adjust to that level once he gets back on the field. The good thing about him is, like you talked about, he's wired a good way. He works really hard, same trainer as Barron Sorrell, who had a really good career at Texas. So I think LSU, if they can get him across the finish line, which we expect, will get somebody to be that final piece of the puzzle of what's a great 2025 D-line class. And he did start out in the class of 2026, now reclassified, but we go now officially to the class of 2026. And one prospect that not necessarily a hot button, not a prospect that is disrespected, but one that did go from a top 10 prospect to a top 20 prospect. Really here. But Lamar Brown, out of U-High, right there on LSU's campus. I'm really high on his long-term future. I know we have him in 5-star range right now, but what have you guys seen from him overall this fall?
Yeah, Lamar Brown's a guy with a lot of physical, athletic traits. I mean, he's 6'3", probably 6'3.5", like 250, 260, can really run. I think similar to kind of what we're talking about with Carius Kern, kind of brings D-line athleticism to the offensive line. I mean, Lamar Brown's a guy who would probably be he would be a 4-star defensive lineman, just given like he was a guy who kind of was like a jumbo athlete. I think it's probably more likely, or like at least higher upside in our opinion along the offensive line. Now he plays right tackle for U-High. He's got I think really good length. I think is settling into playing offensive line. I think the biggest thing with Lamar Brown is going to be continue to get bigger, stronger, improve his base, improve like his physicality, and just kind of settle into playing offensive line. I think there's some ups and downs on his junior film, but I think he's a guy who has a very high upside. When we're looking at interior offensive line, I think being like a top 10 type of prospect on the interior is an extremely high bar. So like I think when you look at kind of where these guys stack up overall, and you look at where interior offensive linemen are typically drafted. I mean, they're typically drafted in the back end of the first round if they do go in the first round. So I think that's important context to kind of understand like where he settles in our 2026 ranking right now. And also too, it's extremely early with 2026. I mean, it might not be early for college coaches because especially with quarterbacks, like college coaches are making these evals and trying to beat other teams to the punch. But for us, we put so much emphasis on the most recent exposure, the most recent sample. So, we're going to go back through all of these guys' junior years after the season's over. And then, of course, the senior year is going to play a huge role. But I think just understanding kind of where Lamar Brown stacks up, he's currently our number 2 interior offensive lineman. And the interior group actually in 2026 is very strong. Like there's several other guys who, could challenge and be potential 5-star types in that group. So, he's got a lot of competition there, but certainly has a lot of athleticism and tools. And I think once he kind of settles in and really kind of fully embraces playing O-line, I think we can maybe see him take a jump.
Charles, I'm going to defend Charles here for a second. One, a top 20 ranking is a great ranking.
Yes.
No matter what. As you said, interior O-line, not as valuable as OT. A lot of people believe this kid's going to be a future center, guard, 10-year plus NFL player. He's still playing both ways. A lot of these interior O-linemen are committed right now to only playing O-line. So you mentioned it with Carius Kern earlier. His senior year, he cuts out the D-line stuff. He goes O-line only. Maybe we see that from Lamar Brown. I do think we're trending towards Lamar Brown knowing, hey, I'm going to play O-line. The other thing is, a year ago, Charles, you only had one guy as a 5-star that played on the interior O-line. That was Cooper Cousins. He went to Penn State. Mm-hmm. The only other guy, if I'm remembering correctly, was Casey Poe, who was ranked in the top 50. Right now, you have 3 guys. 2 guys in the top 50. Obviously, Michael Carroll and Carius Kern. Carroll's going to Bama. Kern's going to LSU. Both are in 5-star range. And then right in that top 50 mix is Tyler Miller, who's also committed to LSU. So there's no anti-Baton Rouge LSU rhetoric going on with Charles. These guys are ranked as they are each year. But you mentioned 26. It appears 25 isn't too bad. And I don't think many people realize this either. Yeah. Carius Kern is ranked above Solomon Thomas, who most people think, oh, well, that's like the golden egg. LSU needs to go and flip. They've got guys rated higher than him already on the commitment list.
Yeah. And I think Carius Kern, being a 5-star interior offensive lineman, like we really are projecting you to be pretty dominant. I would say, and a guy who's like a multi-year starter, like All-American type of player. So yeah. And Tyler Miller, I think, is a guy who we'll have to look at it. Tyler Miller is probably being projected to play tackle at LSU. So I think we'll have to look at Tyler Miller probably as a tackle prospect long-term. But, I think just in a vacuum, we kind of liked him on the interior, but I think when you look at how he fits in with LSU and kind of where he's being recruited, I think tackle appears more likely. I think y'all probably have better intel on that than me, but
it's going to be exactly what you said that played out 3 years ago, that Emory Jones is a guard, but he comes in, he starts at right tackle, and then he'll go to the NFL and play guard.
Yeah, fair enough.
You got anything
Billy,
else?
Anything else? We touched on Jakeem Stewart. We touched on the 5.
You want to hit Blaine Bradford real quick? We're talking about 26.
Oh, he is the new number 1 player in Louisiana, number 1 safety. Yeah. His brother Jacob is a 4-star who just committed to LSU. But your early thoughts on Blaine, who I don't know how many times you've seen him in person, Charles, but he could easily be confused as someone who's graduating from LSU right now and about to go to the draft.
Yeah. So I watched Blaine Bradford's film when we were doing our 26 ranking and pulled it up again this morning just to kind of get a little refresher. And it's awesome. I mean, he's a grown man playing safety. Like you said, Shea, he flies around, big time hitter, super physical. I think he's an elite run defender. He's so good at defending the run, and you see how big he is. It wouldn't I think people could look at him and be like, oh, this guy could easily play linebacker. And he could, but I think sometimes we maybe tend to want to kind of assign position switches where it might not be relevant. But because I'm guilty of that. I've ranked, maybe one of the top safeties in college football as a linebacker, like Nicky Manwari for South Carolina. And he's playing safety and playing really well in college football. So I could see, I think Blaine Bradford just offers so much versatility, so much physicality, and the motor, the play speed, it's all awesome. And I think I'd have to go back and watch. I mean, I think I've seen it in maybe the last year or so, but I would have to go back and watch like Eric Reed film. But like he's a guy kind of like that. Like I think of a player like that in LSU secondary is maybe a guy who Blaine Bradford might remind you of. But man, I think he's a big time player at safety, and I think having him ranked as high as we do as a safety speaks to kind of how he stacks up there. And I think if you're looking at just like just total like football players, like he stacks up really well, in that 26 class as well. So, I think when you look at, just the brother combination and obviously LSU, I think has to be considered like the huge leader to land him. I think he's a guy who, has the potential of being like a cornerstone player, in their 26 class. And, we talked about LSU's kind of in-state crop in 26, and I know it's a little weaker with Jakeem Stewart reclassifying, but I think if you're LSU fan, you need to be really excited about just like the in-state talent, and Blaine Bradford has really kind of backed that up as a junior from what we've seen so far.
Charles, I'd say before we get you out of here briefly, LSU has sort of played this carousel game, this current cycle. They've been number one before. Ohio State's been one. Bama's been one. Georgia's in this conversation. Top to bottom, I mean, I look at LSU's class. Their lowest ranked commit is Jaden Breaker, a guy that Bama and Georgia are trying to flip. Are you stacking, when you look at LSU's class, is it up there with Bama's, Georgia's, Ohio State's of a top to bottom? Hey, this is kind of a who's who of how teams should be recruiting, because I don't think LSU fans, I think they take advantage that they finish top 5 every year and are like, well, it's Louisiana. We get Texas kids. We get Louisiana kids. It's easy to do. Well, it's really not. And they have the number 1 player, and he's from Michigan. And they have the number 1 player at corner and running back. But just a brief thought on a class that you've had highly ranked from the start.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great class, Shay, and we've talked about it. I had to go back and look at all of LSU's classes, but I think, I mean, it has to be one of the best high school signing classes that LSU's landed in the last decade or so, right? I mean,
yeah,
I think too, when you look at the individual players and guys who are players at premium positions like Bryce Underwood, we're projecting as a franchise quarterback, a guy who has extremely high NFL draft potential. You look at Harlan Berry, he's a huge playmaker and a guy who running back is very valuable in college football. It might not show up like that in the NFL draft necessarily, but it's valuable in college football. You look at what they're doing on the offensive line. You look at shoring up the defense, like especially the secondary. I think the cornerback class is elite. So I think the combination of like premium position, high end, kind of headliner type of players, guys who had the potential to be instant difference makers, and then like positions of need. So I think from a team building perspective, when you look at what this class adds to LSU's roster, I think it's a great class, an elite class, and I think what we've seen in college football with NIL, portal, and just the current landscape is the talent level is relatively flattened, considering like you think of guys like I remember like y'all think about like what it was like in the 2020 cycle, or those where you had 2-3 teams kind of stockpiling talent. That's like less of a thing now, so it's really like more evenly dispersed. And I think you're looking at what type of top talent are you bringing in, the positions and the individuals, and just kind of how it affects your team. And then of course, once those guys get there, it's developing them, retaining them, putting them in good positions to succeed. But I think, nowadays in the current climate, if you're a top 5 class, the gap between that and being in the number 1 class is the shortest it's ever been. So I think and all of this is just a projection. We're 3 to 5 years on knowing how good all these players are really going to be in college. So, there's a lot that can transpire. But I think if you're an LSU fan, you have to. I would be extremely excited about this class that they're bringing in.
Charles, you would be the most measured 5-star recruit ever to make an announcement if you got up there and picked a hat and said, I'm spending my next 3 to 5 years at this school, maybe 6 if I'm able to get another year. But great stuff. And look, we don't even talk about guys like Jace Thomas, a 4-star out of Destrehan, whose dad played in the NFL playing at safety. Charles Ross, who you ranked as a 4-star before anyone had ranked. He didn't even have an SEC offer. Blake Baker offers him out of North Shore and he blows up. So Charles, great having you on. Billy, take it from here. I agree. It's the best top to bottom class they've had in a decade plus.
Awesome. Well, Charles, thanks for stopping in. Really, really great stuff. Can't wait to have you on again. We'll probably do this after senior seasons are done and kind of get the feel around that time once things settle down. So always good stuff. We appreciate you stopping in with Shea and myself on the Bengal Tiger Recruiting Podcast.
Sounds good, guys. Always fun.